Defense Matters, a podcast about defense, technology, and the power of that movement. An Israel Defense production in association with IAI. Hello and welcome to Defense Matters, a podcast about all matters of defense and why they matter. I'm your host, Aron Heller, and I hope you're enjoying our journey as we delve into all matters of security, technology, military and strategic affairs, and so much more. Each episode, we dive into a different theme and analyze it with a featured guest. We also take a brief glimpse into the future with our Game Changer Corner, when we look at the future battlefield and the technologies that'll make that happen. A quick note before we get started, we're available on a variety of outlets. We're on Spotify, on YouTube, on Anchor, Apple, so wherever you get your podcasts, please like, subscribe, and follow us wherever you get your podcast. Now let's jump right into episode 7. Last time we talked about President Biden's upcoming visit to Israel and all the ramifications of that. Today we're going to focus on the other destination for Biden, Saudi Arabia. It's the kingpin of the recent improvement with Israel and its Arab neighbors, and the Abraham Accords have gotten it closer to the UAE, to Bahrain, to Morocco, and others. But looming over it all is Saudi Arabia, the big regional force here. There's a lot of history to unpack, and everyone's waiting to see how that will evolve into perhaps full normalization. So to discuss that and a whole lot more, I'm really glad to be joined today by Uzi Rabi, an expert on Saudi Arabia and director of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies. Welcome.
Pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Uzi. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia. It is the big player here. It's always sort of like in the background with all these other things. Before we get into the questions, can you tell us just a little bit about its history, its traditional role in the Middle East, and how things have sort of started to change regarding Israel?
Well, I think that this is definitely a state that has become very, very imperative when it comes to the geopolitical situation or arena in the Middle East, mainly in the recent decades. Basically, it was founded in 1932 by Ibn Saud. This was the name he was depicted by many analysts, Western analysts, and he was the founder of the state. This is a state where you have a similarity between the name of the state and the name of the family. Saudi Arabia is ruled by the Saudi family, and this is kind of a kingdom which was for a long period, I would say, in the sidelines of the Arab politics in the region. We had the giants like Egypt of Nasser and others who dictated the rhythm when it comes to Middle Eastern geopolitics. But when oil came to the fore and Saudi Arabia was to become actually the one of the greatest, if not the greatest, actually producer of oil barrels and one of the main states when it comes to the exportation of oil to the outer world. It has become very, very dominant when it comes to the geo-economic conditions of this region. Thereafter, we have actually to emphasize its symbolic role when it comes to Islam. Mecca and Medina, actually the main destination of many millions of Muslim pilgrims. Year by year, actually, they are, of course, visiting Saudi Arabia, and the whole notion of the guardian of the holy sites when it comes to Mecca and Medina, this is another title that every Saudi king is wrapped up by. I mean, this is something which is very important. Now, what we got here recently is kind of a real change. Why? At a certain stage, the Middle East become an arena of perils and threats for the kingdom. On the one hand, this is the animosity with the Shiites and the Persians, something that comes from times immemorial. Saudi Arabia and Iran, in a picturesque way, I would say that these are both ends of the Middle Eastern spectrum. Second, you got, of course, lunatics like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which became something which of great menace to Saudi Arabia. And the third thing is Muslim brothers. All these forces were to get sort of a momentum in the post-Arab Spring period, and this by itself made the Saudis come up with something which is no less than a U-turn when it comes to Middle Eastern geopolitics, especially as from 2017, a new guy came to town, so to speak. His name is Mohammed. He is the son of Salman the king, so Mohammed bin Salman.
MBS.
MBS in English, of course. And this guy came up with something which is not only fresh when it comes to Saudi Arabia and Middle Eastern geopolitics, but on top of that, he came up with a different set of priorities.
Well, we're going to get to that. I got questions about MBS, got a question about Saudi Arabia. First, let's just talk about the approach to Israel. Historically, they're hostile to Israel, as all are, but things have changed in recent years, and the conventional wisdom is that it's all about Iran. It's the conventional wisdom. Iran is a threat to everyone, so my enemy's enemy is now my friend. Is it just that, or is there more to it?
No, it's not just that. Partially it's true. I think that this is something which is very important, what you just said. Saudi Arabia basically is a very anti-Israel, I would say anti-Jewish state and origin when it comes to the founder, Ibn Saud, the founder. I mean, with the passage of time, Saudi Arabia has become kind of a pro-Western pillar in the region. And this whole thing actually was to be built up on kind of a pact between America, US, and Saudi Arabia. It was concocted by Kissinger, the then foreign minister of the US. And basically that was the deal. We are going actually to make sure that prices, capacities, and stuff which is related to oil industry is going to be carefully kept in accordance with the Western world or the free world interest. You are going actually to make sure that in times of crisis, you are going actually to become our patron, as was the case in 1990. Let me remind you, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, the Americans rushed in and they rescued actually not only Saudi Arabia, but other Gulf states. That was the deal. What was changed is that America changed its priorities. And basically, when we are trying to understand what happened in the back of mind of the Saudis, they got feared or became afraid of a certain geopolitical development here, by which the US of America is having kind of a different set of priorities when it comes to the Middle East. The Middle East is of secondary importance. That meant for the Saudis, as well as other pro-Western states in the region, that in time of crisis, you cannot count on the Americans to do the same.
Well, it's interesting. So it's ironic. You used to think that, Israel's interests here were based on the American ones, but ironically, because America's less here, then Saudis are saying, maybe we should look to Israel as a potential ally.
Exactly. This is the bottom line was that Saudis, we should be proactive. We should find out some other elements or mechanisms by which to better our situation. And the road was there, and it was taken by Mohammed bin Salman that said loud and clear. And there was kind of an article he came up with. Israel is not our enemy. And if Israel actually should be looked at in a different way, it could become kind of a very, very, I would say, efficient partner when it comes to bilateral scale and multilateral scale. Now, bilateral scale, we have a lot to do with Saudi Arabia, and basically beneath the radar, a lot of things are being done when it comes to cyber technology, new technology, economy at large, trade, etc. When it comes to geopolitics, yes, you are right. Iran is there, definitely. And you can actually practice the art of my enemy's enemy can be my friend. But if I would stop here, it would be to belittle what's going on. It is no less than a revolution when it comes to the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is trying to capitalize on the new situation in order to consider or persuade the United States to support kind of a realignment, regional realignment, where pro-Western states like Israel, Saudi Arabia, and others are going to realign themselves under the title of, I would say, kind of a defensive shield.
Well, let me ask you that, because that's exactly my next question about people are talking about this regional defense pact, what they're calling a Mideast NATO. I'm sure you've heard that term around there. Is that a real thing? Is that something that really we can imagine, like a defense pact between
NATO,
the regional?
NATO is a far-fetched phenomenon or notion because, NATO, let's just actually activate or practice Article 5 of NATO Charter. I mean, we would find actually that states are basically, while becoming part and parcel of this agreement, they are being protected by the others in case they are being attacked by somebody. I don't think that we have got there, but if you notice what Iran is doing in the Middle East, and Iranian proxies in Yemen, in Lebanon, etc., are being equipped with drones and all that stuff, or cruise missiles or whatever, what Israel and Saudi Arabia, I think actually accordingly or in kind of a prior accommodation are coming up with, together with Egypt and other states, is let us build up sort of, I would say, a defense alliance, which would equip every partner with the abilities to preempt or prevent like the threats like Iran actually to send, let's say, kind of some aerial threats to either one of these gatherings.
So there's a lot of these things going on here, as you're mentioning, and it sounds pretty revolutionary. But I think the main thing you mentioned was below the radar. Most of these things are still happening sort of a low profile, and obviously everybody's looking forward to seeing, when will there be full normalization, like there was with UAE, like there was with Bahrain, Morocco. So in essence, what's holding Saudi Arabia back? What are they not willing to do that last step?
As I said before, the guy who runs the show is just an heir. He's not the king yet. And I tend to think that if he becomes king, there would be kind of a more momentum to such things. But remember, when we talk about Saudi Arabia, this is basically a Puritan state, where you have a religious establishment which adheres to what we call Wahhabi Islam, which is the most extreme, I would say, flank of Sunni Islam. He has to deal with them. He has to tame Islam. I'm talking about MBS, and they started doing that. He has to deal with his own family. This is a huge royal family, more than 13,000 princes. And he is the first grandson ever to become a king after what we had in the 20th century. So these are two, I would say, foci where Mohammed bin Salman is trying actually to come up with something that would set the stage and made it much more comfortable for him when he becomes a king. So this is why Saudi Arabia, which is a heavy ship, this is why Saudi Arabia, which is a religious country, wouldn't come to the front when it comes to full-scale normalization. Having said that, what we have to make sure is that there are many bilateral agreements, formally or informally, with Saudi Arabia that are going actually to be, settled in and in kind of a way by which to benefit both states. And I would say that you have not only this technology, this cyber thing, you have some stuff that relates to, let's say, the Red Sea Islands, for example, Tiran and Sanafir. There are things that should be settled here. And if you are coming above or on top of the bilateral scale, you would find this multilateral thing. These would happen in kind of a very, very, I would say, calculated way, I would say. Actually, the Saudis wouldn't rush into full normalization.
Let's talk about MBS, really, because we're dancing around and here this guy is really just a transformational character. You said he's the first grandson because all the brothers passed it on. He's a captivating character. He's like the next generation of Arab leader. On the one hand, he's the guy who's building the malls and letting women drive and opening the golf courses over there and inviting all these international conferences. On the other hand, he's the one who's accused of, ordering the assassination of Khashoggi. How much change do you really see in him? Do you see he's really playing between these different things? Where is his actual heart, or is he just stuck between two worlds?
This guy is being admired, not less than that, by many young Saudis. Saudi Arabia is a state where 65% of the population are under 30 years old. First of all, when it comes to the social media devices, and we are, of course, browsing everything that could provide us with more information about the Saudi pulse when it comes to the Saudi street, I can tell you that this guy is being admired by many young people because he came up with some, I would say, new things that were not seen in Saudi Arabia, were unheard of, like movie theaters, like many opportunities when it comes to the job market for young people. And, the bottom line is many are thrilled with what he is doing there. Of course, Khashoggi was taken by him as kind of an enemy from within. This guy actually has become an American citizen. He was a Saudi journalist. And this is to tell you that this guy, very young, maybe...
ruthless.
Ruthless, definitely, but maybe not that well experienced. Actually, he came up with a very controversial, so to speak, action. That was to say that the ultra-progressive elements of the Democratic Party and the Biden administration at all, they said, this guy is not less than a professional murderer. We are not going to sit with him and see what happens. Biden is coming to sit with him.
It's changed, exactly. So, Biden's obviously naturally very focused on Saudi Arabia right now. There's the energy crisis with the war in Ukraine. In many ways, we're talking about him coming to Israel here, but it seems like the more significant chapter to visit is not actually Israel, it's Saudi Arabia. What's Biden heading in there?
Let me take the Biden visit actually as kind of an epitome. If I would like to epitomize the revolution we have in the geopolitical landscape in the Middle East, look at what's happened. American president is coming to the Middle East. More often than not, that was kind of the main story, was the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. Well, what he is going to do while visiting Ramallah is just to pay lip service to that. We know that. The whole issue, or the elephant in the room, is Saudi Arabia, and this is what we are trying actually to say here. What we do see is kind of a side effect of, or extension of, the Abraham Accords, and the Abraham Accords was no less than a geopolitical revolution by which Israel was normalized by many Arab states. Yes, there is a problem with the Palestinians. Palestinians are a problem with Israel, Israel with Palestinians. The problem is still there, but this is not anymore the elephant of the room. What is going on now is just to tell you that Arab states are devoting themselves to their particular agenda. They are not willing to sacrifice actually any other, I would say, big issues at the expense of their interests. And I hope that these all developments, which are kind of a side effect of the Abraham Accords, are going to become kind of a venue by which to better deal with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But, the whole priorities and the set of priorities have been changed here. We should be thrilled about that, because Israel is definitely part and parcel of the Middle East, for better, for worse.
Wow.
We have many problems, but Saudi Arabia could tell you loud and clear, Israel is another legitimate player when it comes to the Middle Eastern landscape.
We have time for just one more short question, so we'll finish with that. But you're mentioning with Saudi Arabia is so interesting because they are like the kingpin of this whole situation. They're like the main player. So when you look at them now, are they a country that represents the changes going on in the Arab world? Are they a country that's still associated with the 9/11 attackers and all those things? Or are they going... Is there anything that could disrupt that? Is this inevitable? Or are there things that are...
Listen, I tend to think, and by the way, they are still very, very are afraid of Iran. They would like actually to get sort of a compromise with Iran, but not at the expense of improving relations with Israel via the Abraham Accords. If I would try actually to come up with sort of, kind of a bottom of the bottom line of our talk, I would say definitely Saudi Arabia is the jewel in the crown, if I may say so, when it comes to the sea, or if I've got the deep changes actually this region is being witnessing. And I hope that this is just kind of something that after which we can have more of the same when it comes to other states in the region. So definitely this is kind of a real dramatic and very imperative development when it comes to the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. 2022, I hope that this would become a year for a real change in the Middle East.
Well, thank you very much, Uzi. Fascinating stuff.
Thank
really
you.
Great to have you here.
Pleasure.
And we'll be right back for Game Changer.
Break.
Welcome back. It's time for our Game Changer Corner. Today we've got an interesting one for you about how during the COVID-19 pandemic, IAI took their military technologies and transformed them into medical applications. And for that, I'm really pleased to be joined today once again by Ilan Bubla, who returns to us, a business development and marketing director at IAI's ELTA Systems. Thanks for being back on Defense Matters.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So let's talk about this. You guys deal with military industries, right? But how did ELTA get connected to the medical field?
Okay, this is actually an amazing story. Back in the 2020, March 2020, when the COVID started, Ministry of Health through Ministry of Defense of Israel were seeking for innovative technology, somehow how to measure people or patient physiological health. And they approach us, and they know that we are a radar house, and we are considered one of the 4 radar manufacturers in the world, and largest ones. And therefore, what we did is we came up with this technology that we converted the radar technology in such a way that we can measure the patient vital signs from a distance. As you know, today, all the medical equipment in the hospital, when you come to hospital, they have to hook you up and measure you while they connect all those devices to you, thus possibly get infected. But our technology can measure the person vital signs from a distance. This is really through a new innovative solution that we have, and that's how we got into this area of solution.
Wow, so you've got radar technology that does remote patient monitoring. What kind of edge does that give you in the medical?
Right. So till today, as I said, they have a medical device. Lately came many cameras that you can measure maybe your temperature and some minimal health, I would say, signs. But camera has a big issue. It's the issue of privacy. I mean, if you take someone's vital signs from far away, you might be breaking his privacy, and some information that you don't want to leak will leak. What we use is the radar technology. Radar is using RF signal. And what we do, we send in a small signal towards the patient, and this signal, we sensing it back. And when we sense it back, we can actually measure the vital signs very accurately. As people know, the Iron Dome, the amazing system, the Iron Dome, the radar, the same technology, is our radar, is ELTA's II ELTA solution. So we use this technology to measure a person very accurately from a distance without breaking or jeopardize the privacy of a patient.
So this sounds like a real game changer in that field. And I know you've got a product at Delta called Tamar system. What's the current status of that?
Yeah. So Tamar is the system that we built, is made from the radar and some other sensors. We actually finished a very successful clinical test in 3 major hospitals in Israel. That means that we were tested by Ministry of Health, comparing the Tamar versus the medical equipment that's currently in the hospitals. And amazingly enough, we are accurate, a same accuracy as the medical devices, but we are not connecting the device. We're actually steering a person, and by analyzing, after a few seconds, we can see his pulse, his breathing rate and other respiration signs, and get full scan of the body and give the information if this person have suspicious of illness or not.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks. It's interesting to see how military applications get to the medical world. It's really interesting. Great. Well, thank you very much. And that does it for this episode of Defense Matters. We'll be back in 2 weeks for our last episode before we go on a summer break. But not to worry, we'll be back in the fall with more of Defense Matters. And until then, I'm Aron Heller saying goodbye. We'll see you next time on our next episode of Defense Matters.